everyone! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Laura, and in today's video I want to talk more about finances. I know it's been a while since my last finance video, but today I'm back and excited to talk to you about retirement accounts. My main goal here is just financial literacy. I want to empower you to make your own decisions and be aware of what's out there for you, as well as how you can start preparing even in your 20s or even as a teenager. Now, normally I don't throw on a blazer, but I thought that it was appropriate since wearing a blazer makes me feel like I'm more qualified to talk about these things. As with all things, I may be prone to mistakes, so please correct me if I've gotten anything wrong in this video. I really just mean for this to be a quick briefer, and if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them. With retirement accounts, there are two kinds of retirement accounts. One are going to be individual accounts, also known as individual retirement accounts, or IRA for short, and I'm sure that this is a term that you've heard thrown around a couple of times. And if not, no worries. The second type is going to be employer-sponsored retirement accounts. This is either going to be your 401k or 403b if you work for a nonprofit organization. I'll start with individual retirement accounts. The two types of IRAs are going to be Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs. Now, I'll dive a little bit more into the differences between them near the end of the section, and I want to start out with what's similar between both IRAs in general. In the United States, once you've turned 18, you can create your own individual retirement account. The top firms that you often hear thrown around are going to be Vanguard, Fidelity, and Le Schwab Tire Center, aka Charles Schwab. Nevertheless, these are going to be the most major firms you hear about and where a lot of people park their money, but I would recommend you to do a little bit more research and see which of these is best for you. If you're just a beginner investor with no real background knowledge, then any of these three firms can't really fill you, although I do think that Fidelity and Vanguard are a little bit more well known than Charles Schwab. With both accounts, depending on which firm you've opened your account with, you'll have access to unique types of funds that you can select to contribute to in your IRA. These can include individual stocks, index funds, exchange-traded funds or ETFs for short, and as well as target date funds. Each of these can even be described in their own video, but for summary's sake, I'll do a quick coverage of each. So one is going to be individual stock. You can buy stock of an individual company, such as Microsoft or Apple. 2 and 3 are going to be index funds and ETFs, or again, exchange-traded funds. Both of these are going to be collections of individual stocks that have been picked by a broker, and that broker will manage the entirety of that index fund or ETF for you. So all you have to do is just set your money into the ETF or index fund and just wait for it to grow. The only difference between ETFs and index funds, though, is that ETFs are a little bit more flexible, and if you're into day trading, then you can day trade ETFs, whereas with index funds, those can only be sold or bought at the end of the day. And lastly, fourth are going to be target date funds. These are, again, pretty similar to ETF/index funds, but with target date funds, they just set a date on when you want to retire, such as 2030, 2040, 2050, and 2060. And within each fund, they set a specific allocation to stocks and bonds. Target date funds really just simplify the process of selecting funds for your retirement account. For example, if I want to retire in the year 2065, then that's going to have a much higher allocation of stocks, which are more risk, compared to bonds, which are going to be pretty stable and keep your money above inflation. A sample allocation might be 90% stock, 10% bond, whereas when you're looking at a 2030 retirement, which is coming up in 9 years, that allocation might be even closer to 60 stock, 40 bond, or 70 stock, 30 bond. Now let's get to the main difference between Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs. The main difference of this is that it determines when you pay taxes on your money. You can either pay taxes now on your income and contribute that to your IRA, or you can pay taxes when you withdraw that money from your IRA in the future. The decision calculus for Roth versus traditional is a few things. One is ask yourself if you'll be in a higher tax bracket now than you will in the future. You'll commonly hear people ask, well, am I going to be in a higher tax bracket later on in the future? That means that your income will be taxed more heavily than it is in the present. So for a lot of us as students, this will be undeniably true that the money that we pay taxes on now will be significantly less than compared to the money that we will pay taxes in the future, even when we're in retirement. The calculus changes a little bit more when you get into working full time, but again, I'll let you do that exploration on your own. On the flip side though, maybe you're currently working and earning a steady income, and you think that you'll pay more in taxes now than you will when you're withdrawing from your IRA. If this is the case for you, then it may make more sense for you to invest into a traditional IRA because this money will be pre-tax, meaning that you won't have to pay taxes on it right now, and you'll pay taxes on the earnings when you withdraw from your IRA. Now, here's another caveat. If you're looking at the Roth IRA is actually income limited. So if you make over $140,000 annual gross income, then you're ineligible to directly contribute to your Roth IRA. If you make between $125,000 and $140,000, then you can contribute a slightly reduced rate, and I'll put that specific calculation on screen. Anything under $125,000 AGI, you're more than welcome to contribute the full contribution limit, and for the year of 2021, that is going to be $6,000 if you're under the age of 50 and $7,000 if you're over the age of 50. Regarding the income limits though, there's also a little bit more nuance if you're married and filing jointly versus filing single, so I'll direct you to the official Roth IRA guidelines in the description box down below. With all that said, you can contribute to a traditional IRA with no income limit. So then what's the catch? It seems like you can't contribute to a Roth IRA if you make over that income limit, while with the traditional IRA you can. There is a more nuanced way you can go about avoiding this income contribution limit, and that is called the backdoor Roth or mega backdoor Roth method. I'll cover it very briefly at the end of this video, so if you're interested, stay tuned until the end. Now, summarizing this, you can withdraw from your IRA without any penalty after the age of 59 and a half. I would highly recommend starting an IRA as soon as possible, especially as a student. Even if you're unable to contribute the full $6,000, you can still start to contribute maybe $1,000 or $2,000, and I would throw this number into an investment calculator to see how much this $1,000 or $2,000 can really start to snowball and invest over the upcoming years. Even if you're only starting with $1,000, money compounded by that 6-7% return rate will really start to add up when you're looking long-term of 10 to 20 to 30 years. Do keep in mind though that some firms, including even Vanguard and Fidelity, may have investment minimums in order to allow you to make your first contribution to your IRA, so keep that in mind. And besides, money parked into your IRA is going to be a much better return on investment than money that's being saved in that 0.01% yield savings account. The second type is going to be employer-sponsored retirement accounts. Like I mentioned earlier, this will either be a 403b if you work for a nonprofit, or a 401k if you work for a nonprofit. Depending on your employer may offer some sort of matching benefit for contributing to your 401k, just as an incentive to help you contribute to your 401k basically. As an example, this could be matching every dollar you put in with 10 cents for a 10% matching benefit. The exact amount will depend on your company, but matching money is essentially money that is freely deposited into your 401k or 403b on your behalf. You should definitely take advantage of this if you can, and you'll often hear that the best advice is to max out your 401k or 403b first if you don't have any other pressing debt or issues outstanding. Really, this is just so you don't miss out on company match because again, after 10 or 20 years, even though that money may not be significant in the present, fast forwarding to 20 years in the future, that money could actually be pretty significant. So let's use an example of starting with a $1,000 retirement account. So if you start with $1,000 and you contribute $1,000 and your employer contributes $500, So let's say that you have a retirement account that starts with $1,000. Say that your company has a 50% match, and for some reason you have a max contribution limit of $1,000 a year. Obviously, this is not going to be your 401k because your contribution limit here is going to be $19,500, which is much greater than the $1,000 in this scenario. But I just want to show the importance and the value of your employer's matching amount. So if you just invested $1,000 annually and gave it 10 years to grow, then over those 10 years and including your yearly contributions, this money at a return rate of 6% will grow to be about $15,000. Now let's compare this to a contribution of an extra $500 from your employer. With the same stats, just modifying the yearly contribution, that money will be worth $21,000 in 10 years instead. There's a difference of almost $1,000 in just pure interest that is gained from your employer contribution. So the contribution from your employer can be pretty impactful. Just like in an IRA account though, with a 401k or 403b, you'll have to pick specific investments to park your money into in your retirement account. Each provider will again have different funds that you can choose from, so your mileage will vary if you have Vanguard or Fidelity, for example. Your options are probably going to be a little bit more limited than your IRA account though, so just be wary of that. Similar to an IRA, you can either choose a traditional 401k, which is pre-tax, or a Roth 401k, which is after tax. And the same holds true for a 403b, where you can either have a pre-tax account or a post-tax account. Again, the calculus is going to be the same here of if you think you'll be paying more taxes now than in the future. Another thing though that I didn't add earlier is that a decent amount of people think that in the future, tax basically will just increase across the board. So regardless of what tax bracket you're in now, you may actually just end up paying more in taxes in the future, which is why some people opt for a Roth. Again, this is kind of just all coming down to your risk tolerance and how comfortable you feel putting your money in now, tax-free, or paying taxes on the money in the future. Contributions for a 401k are going to be taken directly from your paycheck first. So essentially, you'll never be saving this money in your 401k until you go to take it out for whatever reason. Depending on your company, you can also use your 401k to roll over money into your Roth IRA, which is where the whole idea of backdoor Roth and mega backdoor Roth comes from, which I'll talk about in just a second. I briefly mentioned that you will have a contribution limit of $19,500 individually, and then your employer can also choose to match a certain amount. Now, backdoor Roths and mega backdoor Roths. These are not incredibly common, but if you are really on top of your savings game, then these are methods to just really save a little bit extra for retirement. Using either a traditional IRA or your 401k, you can call your provider and ask them to roll over money from your traditional IRA or 401k into a Roth IRA basically. This fundamentally bypasses the income limit on your Roth IRA, meaning that you can open another traditional IRA, get the funds transferred over, and then you fundamentally have just transferred your money into a Roth IRA. Of course, because you'll be transferring from traditional IRA to Roth, you'll probably have to pay taxes on that money that you're transferring over, but I'm not 100% certain. With the 401k though, you want to roll over your after-tax contributions into a Roth IRA, which again, you'll have to call your provider. This is perfectly legal in case you do have any concerns, and I would also encourage you to just look a little bit more into it because I don't have the greatest background here. With the traditional IRA, again, you're capped at just sending $6,000 into your IRA account and then rolling that over into your Roth. With a 401k, you're capped at $59,000, including your employer's contributions. So while you have a personal max of $19,500, your employer can theoretically contribute anywhere up to that gap between $19,500 and $58,000, which is probably pretty unlikely, but who knows. This cap though is relevant if you're doing a mega backdoor Roth because you contribute only $19,500 into your personal 401k and then include your employer match, and then whatever is left over in that gap is eligible to be converted into a mega backdoor Roth. Catch-up contributions if you're over the age of 50 means you're maxed out at $7,000 for your IRA or $64,500 for your 401k in total. So I know that was a lot of information, and again, I highly encourage you to do your own research, but I know that it can be really difficult with how much information is out there and just how confusing retirement accounts and this whole finance business can be. I hope that this helped give you a good introduction on retirement accounts and really empowers you to either start your next retirement account and do more research into the whole field in general. Please let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you if you have any comments about retirement or what your retirement goals are. Thank you for watching, and again, I'll see you next week for a brand new video. Bye.